listening to Seniors Junction podcast. Your hosts today, Namrata Bagaria and myself, Paul Merkley. We are the co-founders of Seniors Junction, preventing seniors isolation one conversation at a time. With us today are special guests, Jake Rothstein of Upside Home. Welcome.
Thank you both for having me. It's really great to be here.
So could you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I've been in the sort of older adult space for a bunch of years now. First, having started a company called Papa after a need that we found with our own family. My grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my grandmother, who was 82 at the time, was trying to care for him. And it was really challenging for the family. And so I would go to relieve her often, typically at a moment's notice. And what became really challenging for me, it started becoming challenging for all my family members that were also going to relieve her. And because she was still very active and very mobile, and her friends would call her and say, hey, can you meet me for a cup of coffee in a half an hour, just for a half an hour? And she would never be able to do it unless one of the family members was really available. And I remember one day calling a bunch of home care agencies that were local, and a simple request, right? Can you send someone in a moment's notice for an hour or two, just to really babysit my grandfather? He doesn't need care. She cares for him. She does all of his, she helps with the bathing and the feeding and everything else. He just needs really a babysitter for an hour or two here and there. And of the 5 places we called, all of them laughed me off the phone. And so I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I'm just recently out of school, out of college. My grandfather hardly knows who I am anymore, but I'm a happy young face. And it really makes his day when I come in and hang out with him. And so I call my cousin Andrew, and I'm like, Andrew, I think we've got something here. Like, everyone's talking about Uber for everything in 2014, 2015. And we come up with the idea, let's build an Uber for grandkids. Let's make grandkids on demand. And so we called the company Papa. We founded the company and called the company Papa after what we called my grandfather. And fast forward 5, 6, now 7 years almost, Papa's doing thousands of visits with college students and other, and a whole wide range of ages across the whole country every day. And Medicare Advantage has realized that loneliness is a social determinant of health. And so working very closely with Medicare Advantage, and Papa's grown to over 300 full-time employees, and it's really a great success story. And that really led us to the founding of Upside Home. When my grandfather wound up passing away, my grandmother found herself completely alone at 87, but in otherwise really perfect health. And she was living in this big house with stairs, and she had just recently had a hip replacement. So or a knee replacement. So she was unable to walk up and down those stairs, and she didn't really know how to maintain the house because he always did all that. And so we sold her a home. We moved her to an apartment in the same neighborhood, this neighborhood that she knew and loved and she was familiar with. And I acted as her home manager, right? I was helping her. I helped her pay the rent, and I helped her get her groceries, and I helped her drive at night because she didn't really like driving at night, and she didn't drive within, outside of that 3-mile radius. And so what we found was that there was this need for support type of services, not assistance. She could bathe herself and shower and, go to the bathroom, but she needed some extra help here and there, shy of assisted living. And she didn't want to be in a community, as senior living community. She wasn't ready for that yet, and nor could she afford it. So, that sort of led to the founding of Upside Home. So the industry, it's very personal for me. Everything that I've done is just based on my personal family, needs, and my very close relationship that I had with my grandparents.
Wow, that's a beautiful story for both the startups, and thank you for sharing. And so my question is that you've already alluded to some pain points with senior isolation and social isolation. Can you tell us what over the years has been your understanding of this problem, and where was it before and where are you now in the understanding?
Yeah, the problem is the same as it was before, except it's exacerbated. There's a lot more people that are going to become socially isolated. We're seeing people living longer. We're seeing people living alone at later stages in life, where I think that in the past, maybe that wasn't as much of the case. Divorce rates are higher in older adult years than they have been. And so we're finding people that are alone and lonely. And we're realizing, and I think the world is realizing, that loneliness is a contributing factor, a primary factor in all of these negative health outcomes, in fall risk, in dementia risk, and you name it, loneliness is a contributing factor. And so if we can, as a society, figure out how to make people less lonely, forget about food insecurity and housing insecurity and all that stuff for a second, just curing the loneliness problem is a tremendous, has a tremendous impact on people's health outcomes, which will ultimately save the system in the United States and around the world a lot of money. So I think that the mindset has shifted on loneliness. When we started Papa, we weren't really thinking about loneliness. We were thinking about providing respite care through a sort of different class or category of caregiver that existed. The caregiver shortage was a problem in those days. And we're like, well, there's a lot of people that just need some companionship and assistance. We weren't thinking about the loneliness problem. And it's really sort of evolved as time went on, when the world started thinking about loneliness and Medicare Advantage started getting very popular, and Medicare Advantage has doubled in membership over the last 10 years. So, and it's continuing to increase at a staggering rate. And I think that the world is realizing that there's a lot of prevention that we can do by tackling a lot of these social determinants of health up front that will ultimately improve outcomes. And so, yeah, it's an exciting thing to be a part of when an industry realizes that problems can be solved preventatively.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been hearing from all the other guests. We've had the Professor Dan Glazer, who's the National Academy of Medicine report writer on loneliness. And he was telling about how in the 1970s, when he started it was a completely different view. And today it's an integral, absolutely, especially post-pandemic, that this is like, you can't say, like how tobacco caught on, like, okay, it's not good for you in the 50s. And this is the moment of this decade is, yes, isolation is bad for you. So for me, sometimes it's ironical that businesses help decipher healthcare issues before healthcare catches up on it. And yours is one perfect example of that.
Healthcare, the industry is slow moving. And so business has an incentive to innovate really, really quickly. And then healthcare catches on. The healthcare industry catches on eventually.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, you hardly explained this. I'm going to ask about your vision for tackling seniors isolation. And I understand the premise, that's the whole premise of this innovative idea of housing, but maybe you could speak a bit towards it, just the same. Elaborate a bit on what's your vision for tackling seniors isolation?
So that's a loaded question, right? I think that there's a lot of different solutions that are going to have to be part of this broader solution to tackle social isolation among seniors. Forget about social isolation among young people, which is a problem as well, we're learning. But it's a very big problem, and there's going to have to be a variety of solutions. There isn't a one size fits all, and there isn't going to be one company or one health system or one government entity that's going to solve all of these problems. And so, because the problem is so large, the way we see it is that there's this really big opportunity to reinvent the way we think about housing older adults in this in-between phase. We hear a lot today about aging in place, and how when asked, 90% of people say that they want to age in place. Of course, 90% of people, probably 100% of people, if they're asked, when they're 55 and otherwise healthy, they want to stay in the house that they raised their kids in, that's paid off, and everyone's happy. However, what we're finding is that the concept itself is sort of flawed. And we're finding that people want to age in place until some sort of trigger event causes them not to be able to. Trigger events like the death of a spouse, like running out of liquid capital to support the supportive type of services that they might need as they age and as they progress through the aging journey. And we're finding a lot of dozens and dozens of triggering events that are causing people to have to make a change. And what we found is that there isn't really a good option short of traditional senior living, which is a great option for certain people at certain stages of that aging journey. Assisted living is really critically important for people that do need help with ADLs, and memory care is critically important for people that do have dementia and Alzheimer's. However, shy of those things, the people that need support, people like my grandmother at 87 that are otherwise healthy, that just don't drive beyond a 3-mile radius or at night, there is not a lot for them. You can stay in your house and it's untenable, because when the toilet leaks or the roof leaks and your daughter or son is in Minneapolis and you're in Fort Lauderdale, it's challenging. It's a burden for the family that's maybe a farther away, and it's a burden for the older adult themselves. So we said there is this in between. This 90% of people is where we're aiming. And we're aiming to capture them, hopefully, before they get to that trigger event, so that we can help them through that process and deal with that trigger event better than maybe their family that might be off in a remote place is able to. And really act as that second set of eyeballs, that extra set of eyeballs on someone as they age. Because what we're finding is that the generation that's caring for the boomers now, or the generation that's caring for the people that are between 65 and 85, people in their 40s and 50s, are busy. They're busy with their own lives. They're busy with their own kids. They're busy with their own careers. And the way the world works, or the way the US works at least, is people have chased career opportunities and they've left their parents in places. And so we're finding a big opportunity where older adults, because of some sort of trigger event, want to be near their kids now again. And they're moving to new locations and they need some support. And the kids can't house them themselves. But they're certainly not ready for a traditional assisted or senior living community yet. And so we're in that we provide that transition phase.
So just to follow up on what you're saying, there are also those of us like myself. I'm a widower. I have no children. So you truly, if I have no siblings, it's up to me to find connections and so on. Otherwise, I would be alone. So I was very interested to see on your website the mention that this housing is intergenerational. And I wonder if you can tell us what you're thinking about that and how that works.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things we learned with Papa early on was that the intergenerational bond between the young and the old was really, really special. And it was special for the older adult, but it was also really special for the young person. And there are benefits inherent to pairing those, two generations together. And what we do at Upside Home, and I think what makes us really unique, is that we work with existing apartment infrastructure, professionally managed, amenity-rich apartment communities that have been built all within the last 10 years or renovated recently. And they house people of all ages. They are built for anybody. And what we do is we add this layer of services in any one of those units in these apartment communities in order to sort of recreate the experience that a person might get from a community standpoint, from an ease of access to services standpoint, in a regular apartment building that looks completely like any other apartment building. So almost like creating senior living in disguise, because so much of what we see in senior living is people's sort of reluctance to move into a traditional senior living facility because there's a stigma associated with it. I don't want to be with all these old people. And so what we said was, we can create, because of technology, because of the proliferation of the gig economy, the technology enabled gig economy, and the ability for us to provide all of these different services like grocery delivery, like company transportation, like all these different things, we can recreate the experience that a person might get in a senior living community, but do it outside the walls of a community in this deconstructed type of way and in a disguised type of way, so that people don't have to be ashamed or be embarrassed to live in, among just older people, but also to really build community. And to the fact that your neighbors could be a 30-year-old couple with kids, and your other neighbor could be a 96-year-old that runs marathons. There are, there's a whole host of different people. Plus, we add this, we help you build the community yourself. So we are engaging with you regularly, your home manager does, in order to get into your community, to understand what things are going on around you, both for people that are your age and for people that may not be your age. But it's all individualized, it's all personalized. Instead of you having to go down to that bingo game in the lobby if you hate bingo, we're saying, tell us what you like. Oh, there's a cooking class down the street. We'll get you there. We'll get you to and from it. Oh, and by the way, there's 10 people from your neighborhood, from your community, from your complex that are going to that cooking class. Let us introduce you to them. So we really facilitate that community building, which helps to alleviate loneliness and social isolation as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're building blue zones.
Essentially.
Yes, terrific. As somebody who has strong intergenerational friendships, I really think that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, like Paul and I, we learn a lot from each other, and I think even our friendship has, over the years, now we are co-founders. It's definitely blossomed, and And we've had two other guests before. I think one was from the Wisdom Exchange Project, which was a bunch of universities sending students in Canada. And there was another gentleman who was in Vancouver doing a lot of what you do, but through a nonprofit, the Vancouver Senior Network. So it's nice to see the similar kind of stuff across the border. But then, of course, with the entrepreneurial grit in America and the kind of a system that's there, which allows you to kind of do it at scale and do it fast. So that's really cool, I think. It's commendable, in fact. So my question is, you have a grand vision, and of course you have done solid work in both of them. What do you think were the challenges, and where do you see the opportunities?
Where there are challenges, there are lots of opportunities, and I think the harder something is, the more rewarding it is, and potentially the bigger opportunity there is. There's a lot of challenges. I think trust probably is the biggest challenge among dealing with the older adult demographic. When you start a new entity, you are an unknown. You are untrusted and unknown. And I think older adults sort of have their guard up when it comes to dealing with companies, new world. And so it's really important for us to build a trusted brand, and starting that from the very beginning when we're still very small, and carrying that through to when we become big. But ultimately the grand vision is to build the biggest senior living community in the world without laying a single brick. And in doing that, we are going to have to gain the trust of lots and lots of people. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And continuing to fulfill the promises that you make to people is a real big challenge. Like, we want to do all of these different things that help to improve people's well-being and longevity and quality of life. And our mission is to improve the life of older adults everywhere. That's a really big mission. That's a really hard thing to do. But I think you take it one step at a time, and you listen really, really keenly to your customers. It's really important to have ears open first. I think with this demographic especially, I think that if you're building companies that are catering towards the millennials or Gen Zs or some other demographic, I think there's some level of prescription that you could have. You can say, this is the app that I want you to use. It's going to be great. Use it. But for older adults, they've got a lot of experience and they've lived a lot of life. And so they do know a lot of things better than we do. And so I think going into an industry or going into business in order to serve this demographic, it's really, really important to go in ears and eyes wide open, and to make sure you really hear what people are telling you and really hear what their adult children might be telling you about what is valuable to them. Because we think we know, but we don't.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think it's very important, all the things that you've said. What advice do you have for our company? You know a bit about what we're doing.
I think it's fantastic. I think one of the things I'd say, like, again, I'd reemphasize, build trust early with your customers, with your earliest customers. Please them really, really a lot. I think that older adults, trust is built when they see engagement with people that they trust. So if they have a friend that has interacted or engaged with you, how can they let their friend, or how can they understand from their friend that was a really great engagement? So reviews are really big in this working with this demographic. They want to hear from people that are like them, that this is a great service, or this is a great product, or this has really helped me do X, Y, and Z. So I think that's one of the things. I think it's really important to think about distribution channels in this segment. There's just a few ways to target the older adult demographic and do it at scale. There's the Medicare Advantage route, which is long, has long sales cycles. It's complex, it's cumbersome, it's pretty fragmented. There's a lot of small, geographically relevant players in Medicare Advantage. So that's something you want to get started on early. And the other one is through employers. I think that there's a big opportunity, and it's sort of being overlooked right now still among a lot of companies, to use big employers that have that 40 to 50-year-old that's caring for their older adult parent, to engage them that way, to engage customers through those channels in order to support scale. If you really want to make a big impact, it's really important to think about those types of channels. Customer acquisition on digital, things like Facebook and Google, that's challenging. And it's a really challenging thing, regardless of the industry you're in. I think it's even more challenging when you're talking about dealing with this, with older adults.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think someone just spoke about all the pains we experience on a daily basis.
I think so too. It's down, it's striking close to home.
Yeah, I just wanted to go and hug you virtually, but I can't.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's like these are exactly. Last Friday was a lunch with one of my CFO advisors just on this topic, exactly the same 3 points, because he is also he's doing the business of one of the US companies in this space in India. So I asked him, so exactly these 3 segments, exactly the pain point of repeat sales cycle. And then once you even do once, how do you repeat that? Because the time is so long. And then, I mean, when you're small, it's fine. You don't have people on the payroll. When you actually start having people on the payroll, then you're like, okay, you can't tell people, okay, we have no money, or we have money, but after a few months, talk to you. So yeah, exactly. So as the parting, if people want to find out about your company, how can they look you up?
Sure. We're on the web, www.upsidehome.com, HOM.com. So check us out there and get in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.